Hi guys, welcome to Griefclass. As always, I have numbers below. If you are feeling hopeless or feeling like you need to talk to someone, there are some reference numbers below. And always keep in mind that in any community there are pastors and organizations that offer free counseling. So don't be afraid to take advantage of those services. This is part 2 of a series that I'm doing on this article by Litsa Williams. It's called I Don't Know Who I Am Anymore, Grief and Loss of Identity. So, this is a channel about losses and about grieving and how we can do the work that it takes to kind of work through some things that we're going through. And what a lot of people don't face or don't realize is all of the secondary stuff that comes along with having a loss in your life. So, for example, if you are divorced or going through a divorce, and that's why you're here in this channel, maybe you're really struggling. The divorce itself, the betrayal possibly, or just the loss of that relationship is the main source of your pain and your grief. But maybe the other person was the primary breadwinner. So now maybe there are financial hardships. Maybe there are children on both sides who have taken sides and don't understand. So there's all these secondary losses that can happen. And if you go back to part 1, I've already read some of this article. I've already talked about certain parts of it. And this will make a lot more sense if you see part 1. But I wanted to jump right in with where we left off in the last video. So the first one that I want to talk about a little bit more in depth today is the relational identity that we have. So I use the example of someone who's going through a divorce. In my case, having my son die, I am still a mother because I happen to have 2 other children. I'm very blessed that way. But there are many people who have had one child either through choice or sometimes there have been times in our history or in many countries when you weren't allowed to have more. And if that child passes away, all of a sudden you've lost this whole identity of even being a mother. And so that's kind of what she means by and I shouldn't assume it's a woman, it's Litsa. I should have actually looked that up. But this person who wrote the article definitely means when they say, if you're widowed, all of a sudden you're not a wife anymore. And I use the example of my mother who's just lost her husband in January, and all of a sudden she's not a wife anymore. And, there's those identity things that we all have to face. I was a caregiver for my son, so this really hits home because he didn't want me to be his caregiver, and of course we, struggled to do that. He didn't need hands-on care all of the time, but there were months when he would have to have a lot of testing, and he couldn't drive for 6 months at a time, and he wanted to be useful though, so he still wanted to work and go to school, and so I had to be his driver. And I, of course, was proud and happy to do it. But when he passed away, even though he lived in another state and had chosen to try to go to college out there, even knowing he wouldn't be able to drive at times, I was his financial caregiver for about, let's see, about 10 years, and my husband too, of course. But we would have to send him money because he would be working, doing a good job. He never lost a job, but he would have a seizure and he'd have to take 2 days off of work. And he always had jobs where they understood that, but then all of a sudden he couldn't pay his bills. And so I would have to just suddenly, come up with all that money. And then also the ambulance bill would follow suit, and soon enough that would show up. And so we're going to talk about some of the financial strain of some of the things we go through. But my identity was tied to that. When I got up and worked every day, I didn't really think about it or talk about it, but it made me proud that I was helping my son, that I had a child with some special needs, and that I was taking care of him, and that I was helping him, and it gave me a purpose. Even though I feel like I had a lot of other purposes in my life, that gave me such a purpose in my life for those 10 years. And without knowing it, when that was gone, I was a little lost because my jobs had all been chosen based on the money and based on how can I help Tim the most and based on the flexibility of being able to drop everything and go help him if he had a seizure. So a lot of the choices I made in my life were because of him and what I would do, what I would need to do as a caregiver. And same with my husband. This is very interesting how she brings out, and this is one of my favorite quotes of the entire article. And again, it's posted below, the link is below. Don't just take my word for it. Always go read the article for yourself. I'm giving you highlights and trying to direct you to some articles that I think were very helpful to me. And I hope you'll go check it out. She says, additionally, grief can rewrite your address book. And so when my son was sick, we had already kind of weeded out, who was going to stay, who understood our life, our crazy life with, seizures happening and, in public. And there was just so many aspects to epilepsy. And me having to all of a sudden drive Tim to work for 6 months at a time. And so I had friendships that were based around that. And a lot of it was women who had other special needs children, and their life was crazy and they just understood me. And so most of my life was based on that. And so my friendships didn't change a whole lot because when my son died, they already understood deeply what I had been through and what I was now going through. But the people who hadn't known me that long and had seen Tim kind of doing well, he had had a seizure about 3 years before he ended up passing away, and it was a very serious seizure. And so our life was disrupted then. But then he really had a pretty good 2.5 years as far as anybody else knew. He still had seizures, but they weren't traumatic. He wasn't on a ventilator. And like he had been 3 years before he died, he was on a ventilator for about 10 days. And so our life appeared normal. We were still dealing with all the financial strain. We had not a dime to our name. The bills were coming in. But, I had some people in my life who I'd met through work and different things who didn't really realize the craziness of the life that I had a lot of the 10 years before he died. And then when he died, I think that those friendships just didn't survive the grief and the realization of, how much time it was going to take to kind of make new memories, and kind of, separate our life out of everything that we had been through. And there was no time to process the grief of all of his illness. Even before my son died, I truly wish I had gone to get counseling. I truly, it's funny, after he died, I was picking out a counselor at one point, and it listed epilepsy in there. And I thought, man, did I miss this? How traumatic that disease really is. And I should have sought counseling the entire 10 years. I tried to get Tim to go, and he just, and he was doing really well. He just put his illness in perspective and he never felt sorry for himself. But for me, I think I should have had more coping skills. I wish I would have had a lot more coping skills than I did during those 10 years. But financially, even with health insurance, it was just one more copay and one more deductible that we would have had. And we were in, take care of Timothy mode. And so we didn't. And I didn't get the help that I really could have used. So even if your child, thankfully, is still alive in your case, don't be afraid to reach out, and I hope that's why you're here, realizing the compound losses of a child having an illness. And I do think when you talk about relational identity, I think our friendships were based on, and this is going to sound really dramatic, but other people with financial messes. Someone who was very, not, I don't want to say arrogant. How can I say it? Someone whose life had gone down a different path, who feels like, you save your money and you end up over here. You put money in a savings, you work hard, put money in a savings, and then you end up over here. And that's always how it works out. Those couples would not have been attracted to us because we were in, even the whole 10 years that Tim was sick, pretty much right from the beginning, we were losing our savings. We were having to make decisions about our 401ks. You know, we had all these huge bills and trips that we had no business taking to Denver Children's Hospital and back, and you know, loss of work time. I all of a sudden, you know, would get calls to run up and help Tim at school, you know, because it takes a day for him to kind of sleep it off, if you want to put it that way. And so even if it was a minor seizure, he would have to sleep it off. Then Denver Children's Hospital would want us to go right back out there, fix his meds, adjust his meds, see him again, do more things, you know. And then toward, you know, as he got older, they were hoping to be able to do a brain surgery, which he ended up not being a candidate for, sadly. His epilepsy was too widespread, and they could not do the surgery that could have been life-saving for him. He just wasn't a candidate. And so relationally, we had had some kind of wealthy friends, I think, in the first, you know, 10 or 12 years of our marriage, or at least, you know, friends who we could go to lunch with, and, you know, hey, you want to come over and let's, go out for supper? Sure, we have the money for that. Let's go. But then our life changed, and some of those friends dropped off because we were too embarrassed to say, you know, hey, we don't have money for dinner. You know, we got a sick kid here we're dealing with. So our relationships changed a lot, even when my son was sick, before he ever passed away. And thankfully, I have many good friends who've had children similar, not really with epilepsy, but they've had financial losses due to trying to take care of a child, either with a mental health issue or a physical issue. And thank God for those friends. But there can be a huge loss of relational identity. I think it's the same if you're going through a divorce. You know, maybe as a couple, you had all this money, you had a house, you had an established place, and then now with the divorce, you know, there's all these financial issues, and friends will quit inviting you. And that can be very hard. So when she says grief can rewrite your address book, friends shift, a distance may arise between friends or family of the person who died. This can lead to another shift in your relational identity, how you see yourself. Your social groups can really change. And you can feel a loss of community and connection to loved ones who are still living. So in our case, my husband and I, we were very into our children and just having, you know, fun on the weekends and going camping. But I do know a lot of families who travel together, and they, if they're in a certain financial situation, they go to resorts, or they all go away for the weekend and all the families see each other. Well, in our case, if we would have been like that and all of a sudden lost a lot of our income, I do think that our community would have even changed more. Thankfully, we had a very patient church, and, you know, a very loving church that we can say we're blessed to have. So they never said a word about me not showing up and having to stay home with Tim being sick, and all of these things. They never said a word, and they stuck with us. But I know that I have had feedback from some of these videos and different things that just isn't always the case. So I wanted to take care of part one, which is our relational identity. Let me know below in the comments, how have your relationships changed due to the loss you're going through? If you're going through an illness yourself, I can definitely imagine that if the illness is extensive and it takes more and more time and it lasts longer, that there could be some grief there, where some friends just don't understand, and they don't want to come do the work. They don't always want to understand your physical limitations. And now looking back, it's like every video I say, you know, we have to be very careful about the judgment, because now looking back, I think I had a few friends who were older than I was, and they started to go through some severe health issues, and I don't know if I processed it and said anything. I think a lot of it was I was just so busy with my own son. But I don't know if I understood, especially if they were the vague illnesses. You know, I just always wondered if, you know, they wanted to be a part of certain things. And probably looking back, because I was very young, you know, at the time, I was probably too judgmental and not really doing my part I could in the friendship to support them, and to understand that they had this illness that maybe they weren't even telling me everything about. So in other words, I think I've been on the other side. That's why I always am careful on my videos about how we should judge somebody or how mad we should be at someone who did us wrong, because a lot of times it's just out of ignorance, or we don't realize that we're doing that. We don't realize that we're not dropping by someone's house who might really need us, because we just don't see, they aren't calling us, so we lose track of them. And I'm hoping that this video gives you some comfort to know that a lot of people are going through this. But if you're a psychologist watching this, or if you're someone trying to support someone in their the things that they're going through, that you'll be that person who continues to drop by and continues to do the work, even if the friendship is lopsided. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Sometimes when someone is suffering, then one friend has to do all the work for many, many, many years. And after a while, you feel like, well, they're not reciprocating, but maybe they just don't have it in them to reciprocate. So this is part one of, again, the article is called "I Don't Know Who I Am Anymore, Grief and Loss of Identity," Litsa Williams. Please go actually read the article. Don't just take my word and my interpretation. But when I'm reading it, that's how it hit me. And I just think it was a wonderful article. Thank you guys again. Have a great day. Look for the next section. I'm going to talk next about professional identity. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.